What if the life of a billionaire's precious heir hung by a thread, turning blue in the dead of night, and the only hope came from the shadows of the household? Dive into this heart-pounding tale where wealth means nothing in the face of a desperate crisis. Stay tuned till the end to uncover the impossible twist that saved everything. In the glittering heights of New York City, where skyscrapers pierced the clouds like diamonds in the sky, lived Alexander Voss, a billionaire whose empire spanned tech innovations, real estate moguls, and philanthropic ventures that masked his ruthless business tactics. Alexander, at 45, had everything a man could dream of: a sprawling penthouse overlooking Central Park, a fleet of private jets, and a net worth that rivaled small nations. But his greatest treasure was his infant son, Elias, born just 6 months ago to his third wife, Isabella, a former supermodel whose beauty was as fragile as fine porcelain. Elias was the heir apparent, the child who would one day inherit the Voss legacy, and Alexander doted on him with a fervor that bordered on obsession. The nursery was a fortress of luxury, walls adorned with custom murals by world-renowned artists, a crib crafted from rare woods, and an array of high-tech monitors that tracked every breath, every heartbeat. Yet, for all his wealth, Alexander couldn't buy peace of mind. He hired the best nannies, doctors on call 24/7, and a live-in maid named Maria Gonzalez, a quiet woman in her late 30s who had immigrated from a small village in Mexico years ago. Maria was unassuming, with calloused hands from a lifetime of hard work, dark hair tied back in a simple bun, and eyes that held stories she never shared. She cleaned the vast rooms, prepared meals with a touch of her homeland's flavors, and occasionally helped with Elias when the nannies were overwhelmed. Alexander barely noticed her. She was part of the background, like the priceless vases she dusted. But Maria noticed everything: the way Isabella popped pills to cope with postpartum blues, how Alexander's late-night calls left him irritable, and most importantly, the subtle signs that something was amiss with little Elias. The baby had been fussy lately, his cries echoing through the halls like distant thunder, but the doctors dismissed it as colic, prescribing expensive formulas and gadgets that promised miracles. One crisp autumn evening, as the city lights twinkled below, the household settled into its routine. Alexander was in his study, poring over merger documents, his mind a whirlwind of numbers and strategies. Isabella lounged in the living room, scrolling through social media, her laughter hollow as she posted filtered photos of their perfect life. Maria moved silently through the corridors, her footsteps muffled on the plush carpets, carrying a tray of herbal tea she had brewed herself, a recipe from her grandmother meant to soothe restless souls. As she passed the nursery, a faint whimper caught her ear. She paused, her heart skipping a beat. The nanny, a young woman named Sophie, was supposed to be on duty, but Maria knew Sophie often sneaked breaks to text her boyfriend. Peeking inside, Maria saw Elias in his crib, his tiny fists clenched, his face flushed. "Pobrecito," she murmured, setting the tray down and approaching. The monitors beeped steadily, but something felt off. Elias' breathing was ragged, shallow. Maria's instincts, honed from raising her own siblings in poverty, kicked in. She lifted him gently, cradling his warm body against her chest. But then horror struck. Elias' lips began to tint blue, his chest heaving erratically before going still. No breath. No cry, just silence, the kind that screamed louder than any alarm. Maria's world narrowed to that moment. The opulent room faded as panic surged through her veins. She pressed her ear to his chest. Nothing. His skin grew colder, bluer, like a fragile bloom wilting in frost. "No, no, Dios mío," she whispered, her voice trembling. The emergency button was across the room, but time was slipping away. In that split second, memories flooded her. Her village healer, ancient remedies passed down through generations, forbidden knowledge in the modern world. But could she? Should she? The billionaire's baby was dying in her arms, and the impossible loomed before her. Alexander burst into the room minutes later, alerted by the finally triggering alarms, his face ashen. "What happened?" he roared, snatching Elias from Maria's grasp. Isabella followed, screaming hysterically. Paramedics arrived in a blur of lights and sirens, but as they worked, Alexander's eyes locked on Maria, suspicion mingling with desperation. Little did he know, the maid he overlooked held the key to salvation or ruin. The night stretched on, filled with hospital waits, whispered accusations, and the fragile thread of hope. Elias stabilized temporarily, but the doctors shook their heads. Congenital heart defect, they said, missed in prenatal scans due to some oversight. Surgery was needed, but risks were high for such a tiny body. Alexander paced the sterile halls, his empire crumbling in his mind. How could this happen? He muttered, blaming everyone but himself. Isabella clung to him, her makeup streaked, while Maria sat in the corner, invisible once more, her mind racing with secrets. Back home, as dawn broke, Maria retreated to her small quarters in the basement, a stark contrast to the luxury above. She unpacked a hidden box filled with herbs, amulets, and faded recipes, remnants of her shamanic heritage dismissed as superstition by the world. Her grandmother had been a curandera, a healer who communed with spirits, and Maria had learned at her knee. But in America, such things were illegal, unscientific. Yet for Elias, she would risk it all. Story unfolded layer by layer, tensions rising as Alexander delved into Maria's background, uncovering her undocumented status, her family's mysterious past. Private investigators reported oddities, villagers speaking of miracles, illnesses cured overnight. Alexander confronted her. "What do you know?" But Maria remained silent, her loyalty fierce. Meanwhile, Elias' condition worsened. Blue spells recurred, breaths faltered. The family teetered on the edge, wealth powerless against fate. Isabella, in her despair, turned to Maria for comfort, sharing secrets of her own, Alexander's affairs, her loneliness. Bonds formed in the shadows, alliances shifting. As Chapter 1 drew to its climax, Elias suffered another attack, this time in broad daylight, his tiny form convulsing. Doctors rushed, but hope dimmed. Maria, witnessing from afar, made her choice. The impossible awaited. The hospital room was a cold sanctuary of beeps and sterile air, where Alexander Voss stood like a titan brought low, his tailored suit rumpled from sleepless nights. Elias lay in the incubator, tubes snaking across his fragile body, his skin still tinged with that haunting blue. The doctors huddled, their voices a murmur of grave prognoses, emergency surgery, but the risks were astronomical. "We might lose him on the table," one whispered. Isabella wept silently, her hand pressed against the glass, while Alexander barked orders into his phone, summoning specialists from across the globe. But deep down, he knew money couldn't bribe death. Maria, relegated to the waiting area as mere staff, clutched her rosary, her mind a storm of ancient incantations. She had seen this before in her village, a child cursed by unseen forces, saved not by scalpels but by spirit. That night, as the family retired to their hotel suite nearby, Maria slipped into the hospital undetected, her maid's uniform granting her invisibility. She approached Elias' room, heart pounding. The nurse was dozing, security lax in the VIP wing. Whispering prayers in Nahuatl, her native tongue, Maria placed a small pouch of herbs under the incubator, ground roots, dried flowers, essences forbidden by modern law. But that was just the beginning. Drawing on her curandera training, she performed a ritual, hands hovering, channeling energy, visualizing the blockage in Elias' heart dissolving like mist. Sweat beaded on her brow as she entered a trance, spirits whispering guidance. Hours passed, dawn crept in. When the doctors checked, Elias' color had returned, breath steady. "A miracle," they gasped, baffled. Alexander demanded explanations, but tests showed improvement. No surgery needed yet. Suspicion fell on Maria. Security footage revealed her visit. Confronted, she confessed her heritage, the impossible act. Alexander, torn between gratitude and fury, dug deeper, uncovering Maria's past as a fugitive healer, accused of witchcraft in Mexico after saving a village but angering authorities. The story spiraled. Media caught wind, headlines blaring, "Billionaire's baby saved by Maid's magic." Paparazzi swarmed. Isabella defended Maria publicly, forging an unlikely friendship. But threats emerged, rival businessmen exploiting the scandal, immigration officials circling. Elias thrived, but Maria faced deportation. In a twist, Alexander used his influence to protect her, offering citizenship and a role as family advisor. Yet doubts lingered. Was it truly magic or coincidence? Maria revealed more. The herbs contained rare compounds akin to undiscovered medicines, blended with psychological faith healing. Science met spirit, the impossible explained yet mystical. The family transformed. Alexander softened, prioritizing love over empire. Isabella found purpose in advocacy for alternative healing. Maria became a hero, her story inspiring millions. As bonds strengthened, a final crisis hit. Elia's relapsed briefly, but together they overcame Maria's knowledge key. The tale ended with hope, the billionaire's world forever changed by the maid's courage.